why we explore. These are not unfamiliar ideas. There are attempts to sort of lay them out and embrace them. And I'm now going to ask Dr. Wanda Austin to explain how we're going to transition from these broad ideas to an evaluation scheme for the options we consider.
Good morning, and thank you, Ed. Ed Crowley has just tried to motivate the arguments for why we explore and to give you some insights into what our subcommittee is trying to assess in looking at options that can help us achieve that goal for the 21st century. Can we get the charts up? Great. One of the things that's important as you take on the challenge of assessing a wide range of options that our subcommittee wanted to provide to the panel as a whole is to think a priori about what are the things that we need to evaluate to ensure that our nation is pursuing the best trajectory for the future of human spaceflight. We were given in our statement of task some of the evaluation criteria that was deemed to be important through panel fact-finding. Other metrics have been defined by the panel specifically. We also looked at history to review what metrics and figures of merit have been used in the past. And the areas that we reviewed very closely were the Space Act of 1958, the 1991 Synthesis Group, and the VSE, or Vision for Space Exploration report that was done in 2004. The interesting thing that we found was that there was a lot of similarity across all of those studies on what are the figures of merit and criteria that need to be evaluated. So we want to try to evaluate what capabilities would be enabled by each of the architectures or options that are considered. And in doing that up front, it helps to, I think, set a level playing field for evaluation and to make sure that you keep your eye on the goal. So what are some of the evaluation challenges? Tom Young, when he did the National Security Space study, pointed out that you have several variables when you are running a program. You've got to look at cost, schedule, performance, and if all three of those are given to you and defined for you, then the only real variable you have is risk. And if those variables are not defined appropriately or with sufficient margin, then what you have is the opportunity for increasing risk. It's also true that getting the same amount of money later doesn't really help you because it forces you to make decisions early on that may not be the optimum solution. They may be sub-optimum solutions. So we define benefit to stakeholders as really the performance direction. Budget is the cost and schedule perspective. And then the risks are numerous and varied. They come in a number of flavors, some of which we can manage, and some of which just happen in the course of the life of a program. Some of those are legislative changes, decisions that might be made by international partners, or unfortunately sometimes there are anomalies which drive changes in programs. So this is a really three-dimensional challenge that we face as we try to determine how best to evaluate the options. And they are not independent, they're interdependent, and the risks associated with each of those is relative to each other. So our challenge is to figure out when better may be the enemy of good enough. We've identified a number of evaluation metrics that could be examined. I'm going to talk about those in detail on the next chart. I know it's hard to read from a distance. But the message here is that there's a lot of uncertainty about some of these measures when you talk about how do you inspire How do you measure public engagement? How do you measure the value of exploration? That these aren't point solutions, that they're going to be solution spaces that we're going to need to examine. Let's start with exploration preparation, and I'm going to just summarize for each of these a little bit of the intent in including that measure. We think it's important to look at the options relative to their ability to help prepare us for further exploration, for that ultimate goal that Ed referred to. That includes robust growth beyond LEO. It includes making sure that we've got a robust transportation capability, and it includes making sure that we're doing all that we can to mature our technology so that it is in fact at a risk level that is reasonable to expect it to support the performance that we need. For science knowledge, Chris Chiba is going to talk to that in more detail, but I could summarize it by simply saying it's important that the science that we achieve is aligned with what our scientific community values and thinks that is important. For human civilization, one of the things that you'd like the options to address is how it supports getting us to the point of sustained human presence. That means looking at things, either demonstrations or technology that help with human factors and making sure that we can sustain life for long duration. In the area of economic expansion, the options that we look at will want to understand how they contribute to growing a profitable industrial base. We've heard from previous subcommittee reports that having the opportunity to engage the commercial marketplace more in support of our mission is something that has tremendous benefit for the nation. Global partnership. We also heard from our other subcommittee panel members the importance and the value that can be achieved by leveraging and expanding the relationships that we've already started with the space station, and that there's an opportunity going forward to build on those relationships for the benefit of the nation, not only for civil space, but for national security as well. Public engagement. This is where we talk about, how do we inspire? How do we have a program that answers the promise of adventure and builds to the achievement of a successful exploration program? This is really key in making sure that we have not only public support, but that our public is engaged and understands the visible interim milestones that are going to be achieved in their lifetime, so that there's a level of excitement. We had an input from the public comment recently where a teacher talked about her elementary school students who might have the opportunity to be the first to step on Mars. That's great for that student, but there are a lot of people who would like to see us make some significant progress before that time. And technology development is the last item, that it's important to make sure that we're developing technologies that help us achieve the goals of innovation and are forward-looking, because they may in fact provide the benefit of getting us there faster, more effectively, and with less cost. Programmatic risk. Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that in the risk areas we've had vigorous debate about how we would frame some of these issues as we try to evaluate different options. But things that came out to us as being very important are the operational flexibility, extensibility, and robustness. All of us have had experience with programs that have not been executed exactly the way that we thought they would be executed when we started out. And the difference between successful programs and programs that get derailed, or at least one difference, is that successful programs have robustness and alternatives that they can fall back to, so that you may not follow exactly the path you started out on, but you do have alternate ways of accomplishing the goal. There's also cost, schedule, and technical risk that would be managed and looked at from the programmatic risk perspective. On the subject of safety, this is something that we've touched on in the last few days, and it's really about the balance between mission reliability and human safety, and making sure that we understand that there has to be a balance so that we are comfortable that we are not giving up mission capability because we're being risk adverse, that we pursue the opportunity to really be innovative, but yet at the same time ensure a reasonable level of crew safety. We've seen over history, we talked about Titan and Atlas being human rated, but what's happened over time is we've evolved the definitions of human rating to a point where we're continually trying to do more. Somewhere in there, we have to define what the right level of, or right aim point is for that. Programmatic sustainability, this is an area where we would include things like life cycle cost, making sure that the program has credibility and stability. There are a number of ways in which you'd want to ensure that sustainability. One of those is in budget, making sure that the budget that's laid out is in fact there for the program to manage to over the life of the program so that they can continue to execute and achieve the interim milestones. Cost, this one is one that we have a specific point that we're all looking to find options that meet the President's budget. That is the target. The challenge in evaluation will be that you may have two programs that have the same cost but may drive a different level of value or benefit to the stakeholder as such. And so we'll have to work our way through that. And then last but certainly not least, we want to look at the workforce impacts. And this is really about making sure that the workforce is strategically aligned with the goals and objectives of the mission that we undertake. The challenge here is making sure you've got the critical skills that you need, you've got the right skills that you need in balance, and that you're doing what's necessary to maintain the intellectual capital and the knowledge management to transfer skills that may be lost as we work through this transition. So our input to the panel is that we feel that it is clearly something that we need to discuss and have some deliberations on about whether or not these are the evaluation measures that would be appropriate to look at the beyond LEO options, and possibly as we merge the other options from the other subgroups, these will be useful across the board. And recognizing that not all measures would carry the same weight, that we need to have some discussion about what the relative rate and relative values of each of these measures would be.